He found his son and brought a war to his doorstep. Lorenzo only wanted to find Clara and beg for forgiveness, but the moment he discovered their child, his enemies smelled blood. A mafia boss with a hidden heir is no longer untouchable, he is vulnerable. Clara refuses to let her little boy become part of Lorenzo's violent empire, but when the Fedora family starts closing in, she faces an impossible choice: trust the man who shattered her, or lose the son she protected for 6 years. Picture this scene, because the tension is insane. Clara is glued to a heavy mahogany chair, gripping a silver pen so hard her knuckles are pure white. Right on Lorenzo's desk sits one single piece of paper. It feels like a total death sentence, erasing 2 entire years of her life. She refuses to look up, because one glance into his freezing gray eyes and her whole act falls apart. But the wildest plot twist is hiding off camera, under the desk. Her hand is pressing tight against her stomach. She is walking away with a secret that is going to drag this mafia boss through absolute hell for 6 long years. It is a crazy tragedy, but it teaches a harsh truth. The secrets we desperately bury to save our own skin usually end up being the exact blades that completely destroy us in the end. Before you and I step further into this absolute train wreck of drama, let me set the scene. We are panning up to the rocky cliffs of Milan, where a massive stone fortress hangs over the city. Inside is Lorenzo. He is 36 years old but moves like a total ghost trapped in an insanely expensive suit. He buried his dad at 22 and took over a crime empire drowning in blood for 14 straight years. This guy has ripped every single ounce of warmth out of his soul, convinced his heart is locked in a steel vault. The harsh lighting perfectly matches his completely dead vibe. But here is the massive irony he totally missed. Believing you are completely untouchable by love is actually the absolute fastest way to guarantee it brings you straight to your knees when it finally hits. For 3 months, Clara is basically an extra in the background. She is a ghost in the hallway, filing papers with her hair tied back, staring at the floor when Lorenzo walks by. But the plot totally flips when the fear finally leaves her face. A grunt messed up a shipment. And behind these giant oak doors, Lorenzo is handing out a brutal beating. Clara is sitting right there. She hears the awful hits and desperate gasps for air, but she stays completely planted in her chair. Any normal person would be sprinting for the exit. Her simply staying put drops a really solid life lesson. Real courage is not always about throwing punches or screaming back at the threat. Sometimes, it is just planting your feet and holding your ground, when the rest of the world would absolutely run away. Anyone else listening to that beatdown would have vanished, but Clara waits. When Lorenzo walks out, his knuckles are completely covered in blood. Clara is super pale, hands shaking like crazy, but she just holds the folder out to him. Not a single tear drops. She tilts her head up, locks eyes with this mafia boss, and completely breaks his brain. She does not look at him like a monster. Her gaze cuts right past the scary ink on his hands, aiming straight for the lonely kid trapped inside. He signs the paper in this heavy, awkward silence. From that exact second, he is totally hooked. It proves something wild about human nature. Even the most terrifying villains on Earth are secretly starving for someone to finally see who they truly are behind the mask. Get a load of how this guy presents himself. Lorenzo is built like a human weapon, rocking these crazy expensive black suits that scream absolute boss energy. Every single hair is styled to perfection. He is the walking definition of control, where just one glare from his freezing gray eyes makes grown men cry. Then you have his tattoos. He has this massive dark cross and a crowned snake crawling up his neck, and he leaves his shirt open just enough, so you are forced to stare at it. He wants everyone to know he is dangerous, but honestly, the camera completely calls his bluff. The saddest thing about people is always the same. The harder you try to make your outside look totally bulletproof, the more obvious it becomes that you are terrified of completely falling apart on the inside. His arms are basically a walking tragic backstory. He is covered in wild ink, from crying angels to a clock frozen on a time he refuses to talk about. The word honor is blasted right across his knuckles. The tension spikes when he catches Clara staring at his scarred hands. She does not show any disgust. Instead, she looks completely heartbroken for his damaged soul. That one look totally deletes his tough guy act. The big bad boss actually stumbles. As she grabs her coat, his voice completely cracks when he tells her to stay. He tries to make it sound like a strict order, but it honestly sounds like a guy begging for a lifeline. It shows we are so desperate for real connection that one tiny bit of empathy can completely smash through decades of toxic emotional walls. You and I have got to talk about this shift. Clara completely freezes by the heavy door, the desk lamp catching a gold spark in her eyes. Lorenzo instantly panics and spins wild lies. He rambles about urgent ledgers and demands she sit down to take notes. It is such a pathetic excuse. His massive office has started feeling like a straight-up graveyard. And just hearing the soft sound of her breathing is the only thing keeping him sane. She slowly sits back down. The clock ticks way past midnight. Lorenzo does not look at a single paper. He just secretly watches the way she writes, how she frowns, and how she tucks her hair back. We all walk around, acting like we are the total main characters of our lives. Until we suddenly realize we have been completely hijacked by the smallest, quietest details of another person. The silence shatters when he blurts out that she is not scared of him. Clara stops writing. She stays super chill and asks if she is supposed to be. Then she hits him with the ultimate read. She tells him he uses fear like a massive metal shield because the alternative is way too painful. When he dares her to guess what that is, she looks into his cold eyes and whispers it would mean letting people see his bleeding heart. The camera catches the exact second this mob boss breaks. He should have fired her right there. Instead, he just turns around and stares out the window. It drops a brutal truth bomb. The people who can actually see right through our toughest armor are exactly who we need the most. But they also hold the absolute power to completely destroy us. Facing the window, his voice drops to a scratchy whisper, telling her to get out. He hears the rustle of her coat and the click of her heels. But at the door, she stops. He stays frozen, refusing to turn around. She whispers that whatever toxic baggage he is dragging around, he does not have to carry it by himself anymore. The door finally clicks shut. Lorenzo is left standing there, feeling his frozen heart cracking wide open. Over the next 90 days, the absolute wildest plot twist happens. His scary mafia armor melts away, and they spend these late nights where he spills all his darkest secrets. It proves something extremely true. No matter how deep you bury your past trauma, totally genuine kindness will always find that one tiny crack and completely smash your walls to pieces. Clara takes in every messed up detail of his past. She learns his mom died having him, and his mob dad basically raised him with absolute violence. He confesses to taking his first life at just 17, a move that totally hollowed out his soul. Clara just stays in the shadows. She does not try to act like some holy savior. One night, sitting dangerously close, she tells him he is not a monster. She says he is just a kid who was never actually allowed to be a normal human. Lorenzo stares at her wrist, totally hypnotized by the soft pulse beating under her skin. It is honestly a huge reality check sometimes. The most shattered people out there do not need anyone to fix them. They just desperately need someone to listen to their mess without throwing instant judgment. You and I have seen this toxic romance plot before, but here the script flips completely. Instead of pushing her away, he drags her into his messy underworld. They turn into shadows, stealing intense moments when the gang is not looking. Clara sees the blood on his cuffs, but she also sees a broken boss who basically worships her. Then the vibe shifts. They start getting sloppy. Lorenzo buried his dad 14 years ago, but that awful dude still lives rent-free in his head. Every time he acts sweet to Clara, his dad's voice screams in his brain that caring about someone is a death wish. It is a harsh truth. The toxic people who damaged us in the past will absolutely control our future, unless we finally step up and completely silence their ghost for good. We get this wild flashback to his 16th birthday. His dad forces a knife into his shaking hands and delivers a totally messed up speech. He says love is basically a rusted chain tying you to weak people. When they bleed, you fall apart. Real bosses do not break, they do the breaking. Lorenzo took that toxic advice and built his mafia empire out of pure ice, but now, Clara is completely wrecking that fortress just by smiling. The scary boss is falling apart. He cuts mob meetings short just to go see her. He even lets traitors live. Absolutely terrified she might smell fresh blood on his clothes. It is the ultimate irony. When you spend your whole life acting like a completely heartless monster, letting in just one tiny bit of real love feels exactly like watching your entire universe explode. Picture this, guys. You and I are watching a brutal tragedy unfold inside a dimly lit mafia study. Marco, the head of security, stands in the doorway looking like a ghost. He watched Lorenzo grow from a crying kid into an absolute human weapon. But tonight, Marco sees the blade is dulling. Shadows stretch across Lorenzo's face as Marco drops the bomb. Clara is a fatal liability. Lorenzo's jaw tightens, warning the old hitman to back off. Marco does not flinch. He steps into the light, reminding the boss that rivals smell blood. Lorenzo is losing his edge. The lesson here is as old as Rome. When you sit on a throne built of bones, enemies will always find your soft spot. We build massive walls to keep others out, only to realize we just locked ourselves inside. Look closely at Lorenzo's hands right now. This guy is the undisputed king of the underworld, a phantom who takes lives just to make a point. Yet in this dead silence he is merely a broken man staring at a mahogany desk. His fountain pen bleeds dark ink into expensive paper because Marco struck his one raw nerve. Street soldiers are already whispering that the boss went soft over a woman. In this brutal life, a rumor like that is a straight-up death warrant. Lorenzo raises his steel-gray eyes, trying to project pure ice, but a tiny hesitation betrays him. The cruel irony of power is that the higher you build your fortress, the more terrified you become of the fall. No amount of dirty money or street fear can protect a person from the vulnerability of their own beating heart. Lorenzo barks a hollow threat, but a toxic seed of doubt is already taking root in his brain. We cut away, gliding through the silent mansion to find Clara. She is locked inside the cold marble bathroom, shaking as she stares at a positive pregnancy test. Her hands tremble exactly like they did the night she heard a rival begging outside Lorenzo's door. She holds fragile proof of new life. Yet the room feels suffocated by violence. She presses a cold palm against her stomach, totally terrified of the tiny heartbeat inside her. In their messed-up underworld, love does not offer any kind of salvation. It just paints a glaring neon target on your back. It is a harsh reminder for us that we simply cannot force beautiful things to grow in deeply poisoned soil. Watch Clara's desperate logic unfold right here, because this is where the human heart plays its cruelest tricks. You can see the massive tragedy forming as she convinces herself that a baby could fix this fractured mob boss. She knows Lorenzo's strict rule. Anything you love becomes a heavy iron chain around your neck. A child is the ultimate liability, yet she stares into the mirror, praying this miracle will shatter his fortress of ice. It is utterly heartbreaking. We have all been there, right? Believing our pure devotion is special enough to rewrite someone's dark nature. But she is gambling her unborn baby's life on a dangerous fantasy. The harsh truth is you can never save a drowning man by handing him another heavy thing to hold. True rescue always has to start from within. The pacing of this next beat is an act of sheer cosmic cruelty. Clara makes the painfully naive choice to tell him the truth. She chooses hope. But guess what? The universe holds zero reverence for hope. At the exact second she turns that doorknob, Lorenzo's massive syndicate deal violently collapses. 8 months of negotiations evaporate. An informant just handed critical names to the rival Ferraro family. It is a precise inside job, requiring unrestricted access to Lorenzo's private study. Life has a sad habit of unleashing its darkest storms the moment you dare to look for the sun. Clara walks down the hallway, stepping blindly into a room rigged with emotional explosives. It is a harsh reminder of how quickly terrible timing can turn a pure intention into a lifelong scar. The camera slows down. Every footstep echoes as Clara enters the office. The atmosphere is suffocating. 2 enforcers block the heavy doors behind her. Lorenzo sits rigid. The lighting makes him look less like a man and more like a gargoyle carved from grief. Then, the accusation drops like a guillotine. He genuinely believes she is the rat. He thinks every soft whisper in bed was a move to copy his ledgers. Clara begs, pleading with the man she loves to see her. But when a traumatized soul feels cornered, they weaponize their paranoia against your devotion. Fear screams, love whispers, and Lorenzo only listens to the screams. It is a tragic reality that people often project their unhealed demons onto the ones who love them the most. This frame will absolutely gut you. She leans across the desk, swearing someone planted those documents. The muscles in Lorenzo's jaw twitch. He stares at this woman, the singular source of light in his wretched existence, and spits out the word us like it burns his tongue. There is no us. He snarls. There is only his bleeding empire, and the traitor who held the knife. It is a sickening masterclass in self-sabotage. He is slaughtering his own salvation, because it feels safer to be betrayed than to admit he is vulnerable. But pay close attention to Clara. She does not collapse. She swallows her tears, squares her shoulders, and totally refuses to shatter. The most profound act of self-love is often simply walking away from someone else's chaos, with your dignity entirely intact. She attempts one final plea. The camera zooms tight as she searches his eyes, hunting for the vulnerable man who whispered his fears at midnight. But he is gone, locked inside a fortress of frost. Then comes the cruelest plot twist. Marco, the actual architect of this misery, steps out of the shadows. Lorenzo coldly instructs him to draw up dismissal papers. The sheer absurdity is deafening. Here is a ruthless mafia don, severing his soulmate using sterile corporate paperwork, a non-disclosure agreement, and a blood money check. It is his cowardly method of sparing her life while legally erasing her existence. But you simply cannot buy absolution. It reminds us that no amount of wealth or hush money will ever bandage the deep wounds of a completely shattered heart. Let's sit in that leather chair with her for a second. She is in the spot where they first surrendered to love, her palm secretly against her abdomen. She holds the truth that could halt this madness. But she knows the monster sitting across from her, if she confesses the pregnancy now. Lorenzo's poisoned mind will view their kid as a strategic hostage. He would see it as a desperate extortion play, so Clara silently swallows the words. She chooses to become the treacherous villain in his narrative, purely so she can be the fierce protector in her own. The heaviest chains we drag through this life are the painful truths we conceal to keep our loved ones safe. She is sacrificing her entire world today so her baby can eventually inherit a truly peaceful one. The camera focuses tight on the pen trembling in Clara's hand. Marco towers over her, an imposing symbol of lethal threat. She knows that if she lifts her chin or locks eyes with Lorenzo for a second, her emotional dam will shatter. She will scream the truth. But she knows exactly how this brutal family disposes of liabilities. She refuses to let her unborn child become collateral damage in a paranoid turf war. So she presses the gold nib to the paper. She signs her name, legally anchoring herself to a lifetime of silence. She is trading her soulmate for her son's right to breathe. The most profound sacrifices are rarely loud, heroic battles. Usually they are just the agonizing, quiet choices we make in the shadows to protect the fragile futures of the people we deeply love. Clara walks out of those heavy doors without a single glance backward, and right there bathed in the dim light of his empire. Lorenzo watches his actual salvation slip away. This tragic fool will not uncover the magnitude of his mistake for 6 agonizing years. We follow Clara disappearing into the wind, from Milan to Florence, washing ashore in a sleepy coastal town untouched by the Mafia. She takes a mundane job crunching numbers. No silencers in the dark, no brutal enforcers, just pure safety. You and I both know the irony here. We passionately chase the fire of danger in our youth, only to realize the ultimate luxury is a profoundly boring Tuesday. True peace is found when we finally stop running toward destructive flames and learn to simply appreciate the quiet. As the seasons change, the camera captures Clara's quiet metamorphosis. That suffocating passion she harbored for Lorenzo does not evaporate. That kind of intense energy is never destroyed. It merely changes shape. It hardens into a fierce maternal instinct. She forbids herself from mourning the man who discarded her, but fate possesses a dark sense of humor. The climax hits when her baby boy takes his first breath. Clara looks down, and staring back at her are Lorenzo's unmistakable, piercing steel-gray eyes. Boom. You can sprint to the absolute edge of the earth to outrun your history, but eventually, it will manifest right in your arms. We can never truly escape our past. We must eventually find the courage to face it, even when it looks back at us through perfectly innocent eyes. Let us unpack this absolute cinematic gold together, guys. The room is dead quiet, right? Clara is clutching her newborn baby like her life depends on it, making this desperate vow that her kid will never touch his father's blood-stained mafia empire. Then she makes the most savage, heartbreaking move ever. She names the boy Marco. To anyone else, it is just a cute Italian name, but the irony is screaming at us. Marco was the exact hitman who erased her from Lorenzo's syndicate. Every single time she calls her kid in for dinner, her brain sounds a massive alarm, reminding her of the insane cost of loving a total monster sometimes. The scars we refuse to cover up are the only things keeping us from walking right back into the exact same fire that burned us. Boom. The screen goes black, and 6 whole years of hiding just vanish. Fast forward, and the camera catches Clara looking completely different in the cold kitchen light. She is 30 now, and that terrified girl crying on a Mafia don's floor is completely wiped from the server. Now she is built out of pure stone and grace. Massive heartbreak does not just break you down, it completely rewrites your code, teaching us that our deepest wounds eventually harden into our best armor. Her 5-year-old kid Marco is walking proof she survived. But there is a massive dark shadow hanging over them. Little Marco is literally a tiny chilling clone of Lorenzo. He has the exact same dark glare, that heavy silence, and he scans the room the second he walks in. You can hide a young wolf in a flock of sheep all you want, but wild blood never forgets how to hunt. The tension in this kitchen is wild. Clara is just rolling out pasta dough when the worst question ever finally drops. Little Marco is standing by the counter, asking the one thing she has spent 5 whole years dodging like a pro. Why is his dad out of the picture? The kid is way too smart to ignore the giant plot hole in their family. Clara pastes on this super fake smile, feeding him some rehearsed line about how families come in all shapes, completely avoiding eye contact. But the kid has zero chill and sees right through it, asking if he ever even had a papa. Her hands are literally shaking on screen. We try so hard to shield the younger generation from the toxic trash of our past. But you simply cannot protect them from the crushing emptiness left behind. The truth is coming, and it is going to wreck them. Let us freeze the frame right here, because you and I have definitely seen this kind of mafia tragedy before. But the emotional damage hits entirely different this time. Clara imagines this ruthless mob boss using his own flesh and blood as a little pulpon in a turf war. She drops to the floor, swearing her love will fill the void of 100 dads. But Marco is just staring right through her. The light hits those storm gray eyes, and bro, they are the exact same eyes of the absolute villain who ruined her life. Clara convinces herself she will wait until he is older to drop the truth bomb, but that is just a lie. Proving that running from our demons only gives them more room to grow teeth. Because back in Milan, 6 years of pure rage have turned Lorenzo into a straight-up nightmare. Now watch the camera snap back to the massive, suffocating mafia estates of Milan. You would totally think that kicking out the woman who supposedly betrayed him would give Lorenzo a mental break. Nope. It shoved him straight off the deep end. He never actually had any proof Clara snitched, because plot twist, she was completely innocent. A person consumed by unhealed grief will literally set the entire world on fire just to feel a tiny bit of warmth. Lorenzo drowned all that massive emotional damage in straight violence, turning into a boss nobody even recognizes anymore. His own top enforcers wake up in cold sweats just hearing his name. He has expanded his brutal empire across 3 different countries, becoming a cold-blooded king who never ever hands out a second chance. Check out how the shadows totally swallow the room as the sun drops over his estate. The most feared mafia boss in Europe is sitting completely alone in his giant mansion, and the absolute silence is just eating his brain alive. This is peak visual storytelling, guys. He played by the hardcore mob rules, cutting out the supposed traitor to save face. He did everything right. So why does he feel like he is bleeding out on his own expensive floor? True regret always shows up eventually to collect its debt. No matter how rich you are, he hates his own guts, and Clara is living rent-free in his head 24/7. In his dreams, she is no rat. She is the only human who saw past his violent mess, the only one who held his hands. He took absolute ride-or-die loyalty and threw it right into the trash. Pause the video again, because the universe is about to drop the biggest, most absolute gut punch of the century. It takes 3 whole years for his paranoid brain to finally order a legit background check. 6 months later, the results hit him like a freight train. The real rat was some nobody foot soldier named Dante, who sold the family out and totally framed Clara. She was completely innocent the entire time. The truth is a brutal mirror, forcing us to finally look at the actual monsters we have turned into. Lorenzo goes totally feral on Dante for days, but guess what? It fixes 0% of the massive hole in his chest. He literally scrubs the fresh evidence off his hands, and the frantic, chaotic hunt to find the best thing he ever threw away officially begins. The dramatic irony is hitting so hard right now. He is literally years too late to the party. Clara pulled off the most flawless vanishing act you will ever see. The movie gives us this crazy montage of dead ends. No forwarding mail. No job history, not a single digital footprint for his elite hacker squad to track. It is like she turned into a ghost the second he kicked her to the curb. Having zero control over the situation is driving the boss insane. He throws millions at the best trackers, but he is chasing shadows. All the worldly power you can gather is completely useless when you have already bankrupted your own soul. The almighty Don is just rotting away, realizing he destroyed his only real shot at happiness. Karma is a very patient hunter, and it never forgets what you owe. Stick with me for a second, because the director sets up this twist of fate like an absolute boss, exactly 6 years after he ruined her life. Lorenzo is chilling in his freezing office. Suddenly, his burner phone lights up. A random text drops 4 massive clues. Liguria, Rio Maggiore, the Bellini woman, and the biggest kicker of them all, a child, bro. Just watch how his entire vibe shifts. How his cold heart literally stops beating for a second. A kid. Time is the one judge that eventually forces all of us to answer for our deeply buried sins. He drops his billion-dollar criminal empire on the spot and speeds out of the city in under an hour. For 3 brutal hours on the highway. His hands are glued to the wheel, terrified of what that one word actually means for his wrecked life. The camera zooms right in on his face as he does some intense mental gymnastics, like, what if the boy is older? What if Clara just settled down with some random local dude? He is totally coping, but the heavy dread in his stomach already knows the real score. Intuition is really just the soul accepting what the brain is way too terrified to admit out loud. He finally rolls into Rio Maggiore. This insanely gorgeous village on the cliffs. The streets are way too tight for his crazy armored ride. So the untouchable Mafia King actually has to walk like a regular person. He steps into this tiny bakery, and the tired lady behind the counter takes one look at his dark mobster energy. Her face instantly drops into that universal, bone-deep panic you only get when pure trouble walks through your door. Lorenzo is a walking red flag in this tiny town. His crazy expensive suit and those harsh mafia tattoos on his neck scream absolute danger. He drops Clara's name, and the baker lady instantly puts her walls up, telling him to back off, and that his toxic kind does not belong there. The lighting here is chef's kiss, casting his face in dark shadows as he leans in. His cold eyes lock onto hers, vibrating with this insane, haunting panic. Total desperation completely strips away all our fancy titles, leaving only the bleeding, broken human underneath. He swears on his life he is not there to cause drama. He just desperately needs the woman upstairs. This brave older lady looks right at the deadliest guy in Italy, and all she sees is a total mess of a man drowning in his own massive regrets. The baker finally caves, but she makes sure to verbally destroy him first. She hands over the address, while telling this literal monster he should be completely ashamed of whatever he did to that poor girl. Lorenzo just takes the massive hit in total silence. Owning up to our own guilt is the absolute heaviest weight any person will ever have to carry. He stumbles back out into the fading sun, walking like a total zombie heading straight to his doom. He spots the cute little apartment building, covered in flowers and peaceful vibes. But out of nowhere, his heavy boots hit the brakes. He freezes dead in his tracks at the edge of the yard. Right there, chilling in the afternoon sun, is a little dark-haired kid playing in the dirt. Bro, the entire universe just stops, and our minds are officially blown. The camera zooms in, dropping the crushing weight of this moment right on our chests. A little boy squats in the dirt, flipping over a pale rock. Lorenzo, the most ruthless mob boss around, literally forgets how to breathe. The kid looks up, and boom, Lorenzo stares straight into stormy gray eyes. It is a chilling mirror of his own damaged soul. The roaring ocean and village noise completely fade out. Right now, only 2 people exist, the blood-drenched kingpin, and this tiny phantom wearing his exact face, like a walking guilty verdict. It really reminds us of a simple truth. No matter how fast you run, you can never outpace the echoes of your own blood. The boy tilts his head, giving the exact same cold stare Lorenzo has practiced in his mirror 1,000,000 times. With pure innocence, the kid looks at this terrifying dawn and asks who he is. The feared commander, a guy who orders hits over his morning espresso, cannot force a single syllable past his paralyzed throat. Then frantic footsteps shatter the spell. Clara screams for her baby, her voice thick with panic. The sound dies in her throat the second she turns the corner. She has played out this exact disaster in her head for 6 agonizing years. It goes to show that the nightmares we brace for are nothing, compared to ghosts breaching our safe havens. She freezes. Lorenzo stands there like a hollowed-out shell, the color drained from his face, his eyes glued to the child. The scene cuts to black right as little Marco raises his hand, pointing straight at the shattered crime lord. Today you and I are going to unpack this massive twist together. The camera zeroes in on Marco, tugging his mother's dress, asking about the shadow in their courtyard. Clara acts on pure instinct. Her fingers grip his shoulder, her tone dropping into a razor-thin register of primal fear. It is the raw sound of survival, the exact shield that kept them alive for half a decade. Marco reads the panic in her eyes and sprints inside. The heavy door clicks shut with the finality of a bank vault. Now they are alone. Clara turns to face the phantom who shattered her soul, yet accidentally gave her the only thing she truly loves. The lens pans to Lorenzo. He is frozen. He drags his gaze from the door back to her face. But he is no longer wearing the mask of a ruthless crime boss. There is zero malice left in his eyes. We only see the horror of a man realizing he missed 6 irreplaceable years of his own flesh and blood. He tries to speak, but the words turn to ash. The framing shifts to Clara. She lifts her chin and straightens her spine. a fierce portrait of defiance to mask her shaking hands. She fires her words like silver bullets. His name is Marco, he just turned 5 and yes, he inherited those exact same piercing gray eyes. Then comes the fatal blow. She says the boy has no father, because the man who made him tossed them out like garbage before Marco took his first breath. Lorenzo staggers backward. It teaches us a real lesson. Deep guilt hits way harder than any physical weapon ever could. His underworld armor shatters onto the sun-baked cobblestones. The cinematic tension is thick enough to choke on. Notice the shift in Lorenzo's posture as he tries to play the victim. His voice cracks. Whispering she never gave him a chance to be a father, Clara erupts. The raw fury in her delivery is a masterpiece of pain. She throws the agonizing reality right back in his face. He dragged her name through the mud, branded her a traitor, and exiled her before she could defend herself. She steps up to the most dangerous man alive and demands the brutal truth. Would his paranoid mind have ever believed the boy was his? Or would he have seen an innocent child as just another rival scheme? Lorenzo's jaw turns to stone. The deafening silence teaches us that the harsh truth needs no defense. He has zero answers, because her tragic assessment is flawless. Stick with me, this is where the storytelling gets incredibly layered. This is the moment tragedy locks them into their fate. Clara holds his gaze, her voice dropping to a whisper. She tells him she simply did what was necessary. She became a fortress to protect their boy from his criminal empire, and from the man himself. When the test arrived, Lorenzo chose his bloody throne over her devotion. He let pure paranoia blindfold his heart. It is a quiet truth of life that we want our past mistakes to wash away, but the universe always collects its toll. Lorenzo finally whispers an admission of guilt. The words hit the stones like lead weights. Clara stands perfectly still. She knows his confession is genuine, but an apology today can never stitch up the bleeding wounds of those empty yesterdays. Clara unleashes her buried agony, every word cutting the air like shattered glass. She warns him that a sudden attack of conscience does not erase 6 brutal years of scraping by in the shadows. It does not hand their boy the father he deserved. Lorenzo's eyes drift to the window. Marco presses his hands against the glass, watching the emotional storm outside. Lorenzo's voice breaks as he begs to know his son. Clara cuts him off, stepping into his line of sight to block the boy from his world entirely. You cannot abandon someone to the dark and then stroll back into the light. Being a true parent requires showing up, not just sharing blood. She built an unbreakable sanctuary for her child. Completely walled off from the endless cycle of violence, Lorenzo leaves in his wake. She swears to defend that peace with her last breath. Lorenzo throws his hands up, begging her to believe he would never harm his own blood. Clara forces him to look at the collateral damage of his existence. His lifestyle is poison, rotting everything it touches, a harsh lesson he carved into her soul. The lens pushes in on Lorenzo's hands, shaking uncontrollably. Clara stares at those bruised knuckles, haunted by memories of kissing them, praying they belonged to a protector rather than a butcher. It highlights a devastating reality. We often fall blindly in love with a person's potential, rather than the truth of who they are, broken. Shoulders caving in, he asks what she wants him to do. Her answer rings out like a gunshot. Pack up. Go back to Milan. Leave them alone. A tremor betrays Clara's voice. You can see the self-loathing in her eyes for showing any weakness. She reminds him that every choice breeds a consequence. Honestly, accepting that is often the most bitter pill we have to swallow. The camera pulls back, capturing them in the courtyard. They are 2 beautifully ruined people who destroyed one another. Standing across an invisible canyon of grief, in that heavy silence, Lorenzo drops a match into the powder keg. He simply says no. Clara's breathing stops as she watches him regain his footing. He firmly states he will not turn his back and play dead. She is demanding he choose his Mafia crown over his family for a second time. His jaw locks tight. He made that catastrophic mistake once, and he will burn down the world before making it again. Clara tries to remind him. He forfeited the right to choose, but his broken voice slices through her armor. He looks like a man bleeding out, confessing he deserves nothingness. He discarded her when he was meant to be her shield. He swallowed the poison of syndicate lies instead of trusting his heart. For 6 years, he built a mountain of wealth that tastes like ashes, all because he slaughtered the connection that made him human. He takes a slow step forward. To her credit, Clara does not retreat an inch. He whispers he is not demanding instant absolution or claiming a family he hasn't earned. He just wants the chance to change, we must remember. True redemption is never found in a hollow apology. It is forged in the grueling labor of rebuilding the temple you burned down. You can see Clara forcing her tears down. She asks what happens if her answer remains a permanent no. Lorenzo's infamous Mafia armor dissolves, leaving behind a terrifying vulnerability. He promises to stay anyway. He vows to buy a quiet house at the edge of the village and exist as a ghost, waiting decades if his penance requires it. He is not abandoning his boy, and he refuses to abandon her again. That promise is the final hammer blow. Clara shatters, crying out that he does not even love her. The accusation is heavy with 6 years of rotting baggage. Lorenzo freezes. She reminds him that through all their intimate nights, those words never once crossed his lips. It proves that assuming someone's devotion without hearing the truth is a silent poison that will destroy a human heart. Her voice shakes as she recounts how flawlessly he threw her away. She accuses him of confusing territorial possession with genuine affection. When he softly asks if she truly believes him to be that empty, she fires back that he was the very master who taught her that brutal lesson. Watch the camera linger on Lorenzo. The physical agony contorting his features is raw. His large hands hover helplessly, desperate to reach out but terrified to burn her again. Then the dam finally breaks. He tells her he loves her, the confession detonating like dynamite in the quiet garden. His voice fractures as he swears he loved her even in the dark days. It is a hard truth sometimes. The people who break us are simply the ones most terrified of being broken themselves. Let's dive into this massive drama, guys. Lorenzo drops the tough mob boss act and admits he was obsessed with how Clara looked at him, to her. He wasn't some underworld boogeyman, just a regular dude. But that soft stuff freaked him out so bad he deliberately threw her under the bus. Clara hits him with the ultimate plot twist to save his own neck. He wrecked hers. Lorenzo takes the heat, saying his Mafia dad brainwashed him to eliminate any weakness. Total silence drops in the room, while little Marco watches from the glass door like a tiny ghost catching up on the family lore. Clara is completely frozen by the confession. It just goes to show a simple truth. Running away from your own feelings usually turns you into the exact villain you're terrified of becoming. Get a load of Clara right here. She spent 6 long years desperate for this apology, burying her hopes just to survive the breakup. But now that the Mafia Don is finally spilling his guts, it's no movie magic moment. It feels like a sledgehammer hitting the mental fortress she built to keep him out. Her face goes deadpan, and she literally points him to his hotel. She's absolutely not about to start a screaming match with her kid in the room. Lorenzo is sweating, begging for a timeline. But Clara throws her hand up like a stop sign. She needs to figure out how to tell a kid his phantom dad only showed up because he finally felt like it. The harsh lesson here is that a super late apology doesn't magically fix things. It just rips open a brand new scar. The camera pushes in on Lorenzo, and you can literally see his brain short-circuiting. His jaw clenches, the dude's in pure agony. Clara just watches him take the emotional damage. Low-key thrilled he's finally suffering for once. The boss slumps his shoulders, drops the name of a local inn, and swears he'll wait forever. She watches the top predator fade into the sleepy town, then drags herself back inside, dreading the fallout. But little Marco's chilling on the sofa, totally stoic. He doesn't even ask what happened. He straight up drops the bomb, saying he knows that Shadow was his dad. It shows you that no matter how hard you try to gaslight reality, innocent kids will absolutely speedrun past your lies and spot the obvious truth. The vibes in this room are incredibly tense. Little Marco's pointing at a ghost, whispering that he and the Mafia boss share the exact same eyes. Clara gets full body chills, realizing her kid has that dangerous mob intuition. She scoops him up, clinging to him like a life raft. Taking a deep breath, she drops the truth bomb. Yep, that intimidating dude's absolutely your father. When Marco asks why she sent him away, Clara completely chokes, mumbling some vague stuff about history. Then the kid delivers a critical hit, quietly asking if his dad just didn't want him around. This is a brutal life lesson for everyone. The worst emotional damage comes from the innocent questions of the people we love, forcing us to finally confront the toxic garbage we tried to sweep under the rug. Clara's voice shakes as she swears his dad never knew about him. She stares into a mini version of Lorenzo's intense face, confessing she kept it a secret so the kid wouldn't become syndicate collateral damage. The baggage of mob hits is suffocating the room. Marco processes this with an insanely high emotional IQ, asking if the guy will ever come back. Clara's totally short-circuiting and starts panicking. Then, in the wildest role reversal, the kid grabs her shaking hand and says she looks like a thunderstorm. It's a deeply humbling reality check. We spend our lives pretending to be bulletproof to protect our loved ones, only to realize they're the ones holding the umbrella when our own mental health completely crashes. Marco derails her plans by demanding a meet and greet with the Don. Clara's trying not to ugly cry, asking what a kid would even say to a mob boss. The boy drops the heaviest questions. He wants to know why the guy looks so depressed, what those hand tattoos mean, and if he's into bugs. Then he delivers the knockout punch. He wants to ask if the dude feels bad for making his mom cry. Clara's sobbing before she realizes it, and her kid has to wipe her tears. Meanwhile, Lorenzo's stuck buffering at a cheap motel, staring blankly out the window. Finding out he has an heir just nuked his entire villain era. This reveals a cold hard fact: you can spend decades dodging rivals, but you can never outrun the living, breathing consequences of the messy love you thought you left behind. Stick with me here, guys, because Lorenzo's spiraling. He can't get the image of that kid out of his head. The boy has his dangerous eyes paired with Clara's tough vibe, and his name's Marco. The irony is wild. Did Clara name her kid after the exact enforcer who handed her the exile papers? That's some next-level petty. Suddenly his phone starts buzzing. It's the original Marco, his security chief. Lorenzo tries to ghost him, but the guy spam calls him before dropping a text that shatters the peace. The rival Ferraro cartel is mobilizing. He has to dive straight back into the mob wars. It proves an unavoidable fact. You might think you can just hit reset on life, but you're toxic. Unhealed baggage will always drag you kicking and screaming back to the underworld. Check out the absolute panic hitting Lorenzo's face right here. His blood literally turns to ice. The Ferraro Syndicate, the exact same rats who framed Clara 6 years ago, are back on the board. His phone rings, and Marco sounds like he's having a total meltdown. The old boss's kid just took the throne, and he's desperate to prove he's top dog in the underworld. They intercepted some seriously dark radio chatter. The new boss is plotting a massive hit, targeting Lorenzo's core. The Don spent years shadowboxing, not realizing his enemies were just waiting for him to slip up. You simply can't escape a vendetta that refuses to die. The harsh truth is that real peace doesn't happen when you run away. It only kicks in when you finally face the demons you tried to ignore. Watch the Don lose his cool right here. Lorenzo demands intel, and Marco hesitates in the Mafia world. Dead air on the phone means something catastrophic. The rival gang's hunting anyone connected to Lorenzo's past. The boss feels reality crash around him. His voice drops to a deadly whisper, ordering maximum security and demanding they trace every move the Ferraros make. Marco tries to get his coordinates, but Lorenzo just hangs up. He stands paralyzed by the motel window, terrified for the first time in his life. It's the ultimate trap of being a control freak. The bigger the empire you build, the harder you're crushed when it collapses. He isn't a mafia god anymore, just a panicked dad. True strength is never about flexing power. It's risking everything to protect your family. Picture this insane morning. Alessandro Ferraro's ghost hunting, tracking down Clara in the secret air. Clara sleepily shuffles to her door. Clueless her peaceful life's about to end. She hits the deadbolt, and boom, Lorenzo's standing there. The untouchable Don looks wrecked. His suit's trashed, and his hyper-paranoid energy makes Clara freeze. He begs to come inside, his voice cracking as he asks if little Marco's awake. He bulldozes past her, scanning the windows and plotting exit routes like a cornered beast. He showed up to play bodyguard, but his presence just dropped a massive target on their backs. It brings up a painful reality. The people trying the hardest to play the hero are usually the ones dragging you headfirst into the danger zone. Look at the tension between these exes. Lorenzo's checking for snipers outside like it's a normal morning routine. Clara buries her panic and offers him coffee to stay sane. He shuts that down and tells her to sit. Clara enters defense mode, crossing her arms, hitting him with the reality check that she stopped being his subordinate years ago. Lorenzo shuts his eyes, the regret visibly eating him alive. Dropping the tough guy act, he begs her to hear him out. He stays on his feet, shoving his hands in his pockets because he's literally shaking. Then, he drops the bomb, that betrayal accusation from 6 years ago. He was 100% wrong. It takes absolute rock bottom for an alpha boss to eat his pride, but sadly, a late apology is useless when the trauma is permanent. Clara hits him with the cold shoulder, stating she already knew he was wrong. Then Lorenzo drops a massive plot twist. He confesses the actual mole was Dante, secretly ratting them out to the Ferraro cartel. Destroying his syndicate from the inside and using Clara as a scapegoat was a genius chess move. The color vanishes from her face, realizing the hit was always meant for her. Lorenzo admits she was his kryptonite. the only person he truly trusted, and losing her ruined him. When she demands why he's spilling this tea now, his voice gets dark. He straight up tells her he eliminated Dante 3 years ago. You and I both know this twisted lesson. We always think getting revenge will fix our trauma, but taking out enemies doesn't heal a thing. It just leaves you alone with dirty hands. Listen up, because this is where the plot completely explodes. Lorenzo stares at Clara, his eyes packed with dread, and drops a massive bomb. The Ferraro bloodline actually survived. The new heir is out for blood, hunting down the only woman Lorenzo ever gave a damn about. That hits Clara like a freight train. She practically chokes out the one question she is terrified of. Do they know about their son? Lorenzo swallows hard, unable to deny it. His hollow eyes drift down the hall, locking straight onto little Marco's door. The silence gets entirely suffocating until Clara just loses it. Mama Bear mode activates, screaming that he is not dragging his mafia bloodshed into her quiet life. The big lesson here: you can run off the edge of the map all you want, but your past choices are like a homing missile. They will absolutely always track you down. This is the second the oxygen gets sucked right out of the room. Lorenzo drops his voice to a dark whisper. If Alessandro finds Marco, their innocent kid instantly becomes a pawn in a massive mafia war. Clara is literally shaking with rage. She points straight at the door, demanding he go back to Milan and play dead to protect their boy. But Lorenzo just stands there like a busted concrete statue. He tells her the hunt is already on, and running now leaves them as sitting ducks. She snaps back, flexing that she survived 6 whole years without his protection. Lorenzo just pulls his shaking hands from his pockets and hits her with brutal facts. Hiding in the dark is a great strategy, until somebody flips the light switch. It is a tough life lesson, but simply closing your eyes never makes the real monsters go away. You and I need to look at this massive shift in power. Clara finally breaks down, collapsing into her chair as the nightmares she spent 6 years dodging catch up to her. Her voice is barely a whisper when she asks what he actually wants. Lorenzo drops to the floor, crouching below her eye level. This ruthless mob boss strips away his ego, begging to protect them. He promises to flood the village with his guys, building an invisible fortress around her. She demands to know his price. Lorenzo swears there is zero catch. He refuses to use this mafia terror to force his way into being a father. He just wants them to survive the bloodbath. It teaches us something huge. The truest form of love is not always holding someone close. Sometimes it means building a giant wall to keep them safe, even if you are stuck on the outside forever. Picture Lorenzo dropping this heavy vow. He swears that the second this mafia threat is buried, he will vanish into thin air forever, but right now he absolutely refuses to leave them out in the open. Clara stares him down, looking for his usual mobster manipulation. But all she sees is the exact same terrified panic she feels whenever she looks at their kid. She reluctantly takes the deal, her voice shaking as she drops the hardest boundaries. His muscle must remain totally invisible, and little Marco cannot know a single thing. Above all else, Lorenzo is completely banned from playing dad. He just takes it, quietly accepting his bitter exile. It shows you how brutal life gets. The heaviest punishment on earth is standing just inches away from the person you love most, permanently forbidden from ever reaching out to hold them. Notice how the background street noise completely cuts out in this specific shot. The soft morning light hits Clara, but her eyes are locked in as pure, unforgiving steel. This is a mother pushed to the absolute edge of her sanity, and she is not playing around. Dropping her voice to an insanely harsh whisper, she swears to Lorenzo that if he dares to go behind her back, it is over. If he so much as breathes a single hello toward that little boy without her direct permission, she will literally end him herself, and trust me, that threat is not just empty air. She means every single syllable. It brings up one of the most basic rules of survival we all need to learn. You can mess with a lot of dangerous things in this crazy world, but you never, ever test a mother who has her back shoved aggressively against the wall. Let the camera pan across what looks like the perfect neighborhood dream, but Clara is a pro at reading the shadows. Otherwise, she would completely miss the mafia watchers lingering out of sight. There is a woman jogging way too slowly past the bakery, and a fisherman with a flawless view of Clara's front door. On the surface, it looks like paradise, but underneath, Clara is practically choking. For 6 years, she tasted actual freedom, keeping her kid off the mob radar. Now that heavy iron cage has slammed right back down. The craziest twist is that she has to step inside and lock the door herself just to survive. It leaves us with a major reality check. We always think freedom is just finding the right spot on a map. But true freedom only happens when you can finally stop checking your rearview mirror. The scene rips into a cramped-in room that Lorenzo flipped into a Mafia command center. Shadows cannot hide how exhausted he looks, his face lit by the glare of encrypted monitors. He is glued to a secure line, taking in frantic updates from Milan. The youngest Ferraro boss is out there hunting, ripping through archives to find a fatal weakness. Lorenzo clenches his jaw. He swore he burned every trace of Clara to ash years ago, but this update delivers a chilling reality check, proving that human memory always outlives a deleted file. You can try to throw a match on your history, but the life lesson here is brutal. Secrets are exactly like water. No matter how tight you clench your fists, they always find the narrowest little crack to bleed right through. The camera cuts to Lorenzo at the window, sunlight catching the dust around his dark silhouette. Down in those streets, his own flesh and blood sits at a kitchen table, asking questions Clara cannot safely answer. This kid just wanted to know what his father's voice sounded like. That simple wish shatters this hardened mobster more completely than a bullet ever could. His son spent 5 agonizing years growing up without a dad. Now the kid is barely 50 meters away. Yet Lorenzo is totally banned from offering even a basic hello. A Mafia king commanding thousands of lives is entirely powerless over his own. It brings us to a harsh reminder. All the power and endless wealth in the universe amount to absolute zero when you are permanently forbidden from holding the people you actually love. Stick with me, because you and I can practically feel these walls closing in. Lorenzo barks vicious commands at his crew, desperate to outrun the Mafia slaughter. On the phone, his guy begs him to show restraint. If the Ferraros figure out why Lorenzo is hiding here, their world ends. The line dies. Lorenzo's posture hardens like pure steel. He is not waiting for the executioner. The scene cuts violently to Clara guiding her son to school. Right as Lorenzo steps out of the mist then, the craziest climax hits. Little Marco spots the massive mobster first, his eyes snapping wide with pure recognition. It shows us a brutally honest truth today. You can build iron fortresses to hide your dark history, but fate will always find a twisted way to bring those walls crashing right down to the earth. Let the camera freeze on this exact frame. Pause the video here and study the agonizing distance between these three. Look at the stiff, panicked angle of Clara's shoulders as her mama bear instinct screams to bolt. Then check out the trembling in Lorenzo's jaw. This guy has violently dismantled criminal empires, yet he is entirely paralyzed by a small boy in a school uniform. The morning light casts an unforgiving shadow across the pavement, literally splitting their worlds in half. It is a masterpiece of unsaid agony, suspended in pure silence. Moments like this offer a profound lesson. Sometimes we have to forcefully hit pause on our fast-moving lives to truly see the heavy damage we carry. The absolute hardest battles in this world are never fought with weapons, but with the haunting gravity of an enduring love. The camera captures the quiet brutality of this standoff. Clara stands rigid, acting as a shield blocking her son from his Mafia father. She crouches low, her voice shaking, begging little Marco to walk the rest of the way to school alone. Lorenzo, this hardened enforcer, stands rooted to the pavement like lead. The kid glances between the adults, sensing the massive tension. He nods quietly, takes a few hesitant steps, and then stops. He turns back around to study this towering stranger. It shows how life operates with a cruel irony. We exhaust our souls running away from our worst mistakes, only to find our dark history staring right back at us through the pure eyes of our own kids. It leaves us with a deeply painful truth. The scariest ghosts we desperately try to outrun are often the exact ones we breathed life into. Look at the insane tragedy unfolding here. The little boy points at the mobster's heavily inked hands, whispering that his drawings are really nice. It is a wild moment of pure innocence, blind to the fact that those exact hands have violently ruined countless lives. The camera lingers on Lorenzo's completely fractured expression. This terrifying guy blinks, looking totally disarmed, and murmurs a hollow thank you. The second those school doors click shut, the tension shatters. Clara violently turns on him, her fury boiling over at this reckless visit. Lorenzo slices through her panic with a dead, empty tone. Time has officially run out. They retreat to a quiet cafe, hiding deep in the shadows. It reminds us of a hard truth we all face eventually. The massive walls we spend years building to keep the monsters out often become the exact cages that trap us when real danger finally knocks. You and I are about to watch everything completely hit the fan in this cafe scene. Lorenzo buys a coffee he does not even touch. while Clara sits across from him looking stiff as a board. Begging him to talk, then, boom, he drops the absolute nuke. Ferraro just made a massive play. He sent his goons to squeeze Daniela, this sweet old accountant from Lorenzo's shady history. Clara practically turns into a block of ice right there. Why? Because Daniela cracked under the Mafia pressure and spilled every single bean about Clara running away into the night. You can burn every bridge, change your name, and completely vanish, but someone always remembers your face. It just goes to show you that no matter how deep you bury your past, the smallest forgotten detail will always come back to knock your whole house down. Lorenzo keeps his eyes totally dead, giving us a literal masterclass in keeping a poker face. He leans across the table into the shadows and drops the worst spoiler imaginable. He whispers that Daniela noticed Clara looked pregnant, right before she vanished. He does not even have to finish his thought. Clara slaps a shaking hand over her mouth because she realizes the mob knows she had a kid. She starts choking back these awful sobs. Absolutely terrified the Mafia will use her little boy to control the Dawn. But Lorenzo hits her with the brutal truth. The hit is out on both of them now. It is a massive reality check for anyone watching. The exact second you start loving another person more than your own life, you hand the cruel world the absolute best weapon it could ever use to completely destroy you. Look at how absolutely insane this Mafia chess game has become. Ferraro is completely out of his mind with greed. Kidnapping young Marco would be the ultimate flex, proving the untouchable Don Lorenzo can actually bleed. Lorenzo just sits there, letting his terrifying shadow swallow Clara whole. He tells her straight up that her cozy hiding phase is officially cancelled. They need to pack up and run to his heavily guarded fortress today. Clara is crying her eyes out, begging to go back to her quiet life. But Lorenzo shuts that down instantly with some cold logic. A normal life is totally useless if your kid is dead. It is a super harsh wake-up call. Clinging to a comfortable lie is the absolute worst mistake you can make when a brutal reality is busy kicking your front door right off its hinges. Those harsh words basically punch her right in the gut. 6 brutal years of fighting for a peaceful life get completely deleted over a cup of lukewarm coffee. When she nervously asks where they are supposed to run, the boss drops one single word: Milan, his massive mob compound. Clara lets out this crazy, broken laugh because the irony is just suffocating. He wants her to drag their innocent kid directly into the nerve center of his criminal syndicate. Lorenzo does not even blink, promising his giant walls will keep them safe. But she knows they are just trading one prison for a golden cage, until Ferraro gets taken out. It is crazy how life deals these terrible hands. Sometimes the only way to survive a deadly storm is to walk right into the middle of it, even if you lose your own soul in the process. You can literally hear the imaginary jail cell slamming shut on her. Clara spent her whole adult life running away from this exact mob violence. And now the biggest monster in the room is her only bodyguard. She begs him for just a little more time, her voice cracking and making everyone in the cafe stare. She whispers that it is totally insane for him to demand her trust after all the horrible things he did. This shot right here will seriously wreck you. Lorenzo just quietly drops his head. He knows he does not deserve her forgiveness. But he asks for it anyway, because the other option is getting taken out by hitmen. It honestly shows a really dark truth about living. The hardest choices are never between good and bad. They are just picking between 2 brutal types of pain and hoping you manage to survive. Picture this intense shot with me. Clara presses both hands hard into the table, her knuckles totally white, trying so desperately to hide her shaking wrists. She is actually trying to lay down ground rules for a literal mafia boss, demanding he keep little Marco away from the gang violence. She brings up boundaries and going back to normal, acting like she is negotiating a lease on an apartment. But you and I know the actual truth. You cannot dip just a single toe into a river of blood. You either stay safe on the beach, or the dark water drags you to the bottom. Clara thinks she is protecting her kid, but she is hand-delivering him to the exact villain she ran from. Watching her cling to this fake sense of control is so sad, and it proves that blind denial is easily our absolute worst human flaw. The camera zooms in on Lorenzo, and you have to catch this tiny twitch in his jaw. It is the only crack in his stone-cold face. He softly asks what happens to his relationship with his son after the war ends. Clara has been dodging this nightmare since day one. She admits she has zero idea if the boss being around will save Marco or completely ruin him, but then she makes a massive mistake. Her stare softens, and she thanks him for choosing to warn them. What a total disaster. She is confusing a calculated mafia tactic for actual human empathy. This gives us a major lesson we should never forget. Just because a person shows you one tiny second of kindness, it absolutely does not wipe out an entire lifetime they spent doing dirty work in the shadows. The scene gets super chilling as Clara basically digs her own grave. She praises the mob boss, whispering that he could have kidnapped them, but decided to ask nicely. She is looking right at the guy who ruined her life, genuinely thinking he is a changed man. Then she drops the ultimate tearjerker. Her little boy actually wants his dad. When she reveals Marco's innocent hopes, Lorenzo's tough guy mask completely shatters, showing this crazy raw emotion. Clara takes a shaky breath and seals their fate, saying they will figure everything out once they get to safety. The irony is wild. She thinks they are teaming up to hide from a storm, entirely forgetting he is the actual hurricane. It points to a fatal human flaw. Unchecked hope is honestly the most dangerous poison you can ever choose to swallow. 3 hours later, the trap officially snaps shut. They are flying down the highway to Milan inside Lorenzo's armored SUV, which is basically a tank on wheels. Little Marco is in the back, pressing his face against the dark windows. Up front, Clara is sitting so stiff her spine might actually snap. Then the kid shatters the awkward silence, asking why the car is so ridiculously huge. Lorenzo locks eyes with his son in the mirror and softly says he needs a giant ride to protect important things. Stick with me here, because this dynamic is wild. This innocent kid fully believes he is on an epic family road trip, entirely clueless that he just locked himself inside a bulletproof prison. It proves a sad point about life. Ignorance might feel like bliss, but it will never actually keep you safe from the real world. Kids have this savage radar for the truth, and Marco digs right into the drama. When Lorenzo talks about protecting what he loves, the boy drops an absolute nuke of innocence. He casually asks if his dad actually cares about his mom. The tension in the SUV immediately spikes. Clara completely freezes up, not even breathing. Lorenzo grips the steering wheel like a life raft and chokes out a desperate yes. But the kid shows zero mercy, demanding to know why he abandoned them for years if he loved them so much. It is just brutal. Lorenzo takes the hit like a champ, confessing he made a massive mistake that haunts him every single day. This scene proves such an amazing life lesson. You can be the most terrifying mob boss on the planet, but a child simple, honest question will still bring you straight to your knees. This little kid drops some insanely deep wisdom, casually pointing out that saying sorry does not fix broken toys, but it still counts. Lorenzo totally agrees when Marco asks if he is going to keep trying. Lorenzo stares at Clara in the mirror and swears he will try for as long as it takes. The heavy vibe finally snaps when they pull up to the estate's massive iron gates. It is this huge, dark villa built right into a mountain. Marco is completely hyped, calling it a giant castle. Lorenzo gently corrects him, while Clara just sits there gripping the door handle. She knows the dark mafia business that happens in that house. It leaves us with a wild truth about how we see the world. People romanticize the idea of a beautiful stone castle, completely forgetting they were literally designed to trap desperate prisoners inside. The camera goes into slow motion at the gates, zooming in on Clara's shaking hands. Years ago, she was basically invisible in this city, totally ignored by all these mafia guys. Now she is riding in the boss's car, completely stuck in this weird middle ground. Is she the queen of the underworld, a high-value hostage, or just the mother of the next mob boss? It highlights a crazy truth about life. The regular streets we used to walk down without thinking can easily turn into the absolute worst traps. Lorenzo tells her to hold on, sounding super stressed out, and steps out into the evening air. He gives his head bodyguard a serious nod, then opens the door for his kid. Little Marco steps out onto the gravel, his wide eyes taking in this massive, shady criminal empire that he never even asked to be a part of. Picture this absolutely massive, cold stone mafia compound. It is swarming with armed guards sweating bullets. Right in the middle of this organized chaos is tiny Marco, taking in the sights like he is at a theme park. Lorenzo completely drops his terrifying boss persona, kneeling down to introduce his kid to his scarred head of security. The boy looks up at this absolute unit of a hitman and happily yells that they have the exact same name. Stick with me here, guys, because this is where it gets crazy. You watch this stone-cold mercenary completely melt. A genuine smile takes over his ruined face, honestly. It is a wild reminder for all of us, no matter how huge the emotional walls we build are. Pure innocence will always find a way to smash right through that heavy armor. Week 1 inside this insane golden prison is giving major luxury mixed with pure panic. Clara and her kid are totally locked down in a massive wing, staring out at gardens that look completely fake. Lorenzo is out fighting some invisible gang war during the day, but the man never misses dinner. Young Marco adapts to this wild mob routine like it is nothing to him. His dad is just a quiet guy with sick ink all over his arms. The kid reaches out, traces the dark sleeves, and asks what the drawings mean. Lorenzo casually explains his tattoos help him track the things that matter most. It is an incredibly heavy moment, guys. We all drag around the heavy baggage of our past, but some people choose to carve their biggest, darkest mistakes directly into their own skin to never forget. The kid simply refuses to let it go, pressing his mafia boss dad for the tea on what exactly he needs to remember. You can literally see the sweat forming on Lorenzo as he scrambles to spin his violent mob lifestyle into a bedtime story. He tells his son the ink is just a reminder to protect his family. Marco instantly hypes up Clara, dropping the fact that his mom keeps him safe even when she is terrified. Then this tiny child absolutely roasts the fearsome crime boss. Staring with those identical gray eyes, he innocently asks if his dad is actually good at not being scared. This plot twist is a total masterclass in tension. Guys, it drops a massive lesson on us. You can act incredibly tough, but a smart kid will always spot the sheer panic hiding right behind your eyes. In this dead silent room, the terrifying dawn totally crumbles. Lorenzo looks at his son and whispers that he is absolutely terrified of failing his crew and his family. Using that flawless 5-year-old logic, Marco suggests his parents just team up to protect each other. Clara completely melts watching this, but listen. Happiness does not stick around long in the underworld. Literally 3 days later, a rival mafia crew blows Clara's old apartment straight to Kingdom Come, missing her by a hair. The absolute shock value here carries a massive truth bomb for everyone tuning in. The razor-thin line between totally losing everything you love and getting a miraculous second chance at life is usually just a matter of crazy, unpredictable timing. Let us dive into the absolute chaos when the walls close in. That smoking crater proves the rival syndicate is out for blood, while their kid sleeps. Lorenzo drags Clara into a dark hallway to drop the sickest reality check. He tells her the enemies know she is his ultimate soft spot. Those giant gates outside are not keeping danger out anymore. They are locking the targets in. If she leaves, it is game over. Clara starts hyperventilating, asking how long they are trapped in this luxury bunker. Lorenzo goes completely cold, admitting they are stuck until he wipes the enemy family off the map. It is insane, but it teaches us something real. We all think we can outrun our shady pasts, but eventually the universe always comes to collect the check. Clara literally chokes on that idea. She looks at the man she is obsessed with and realizes he is casually planning a straight-up mob execution. This icy, business-like approach to catching bodies is exactly why she ran away 6 years ago. Her voice cracks as she asks if putting a hit on this guy will actually end the drama. Lorenzo just looks away. Looking like a guy who has spent his life swimming in a pool of vendettas, he drops a brutal truth bomb. There is always another villain waiting in the shadows. You and I both know how this dark web works. Getting revenge is never a faucet you can simply turn off once you catch a win, and the life lesson here is massive. Trying to fix your deepest trauma by crushing other people only traps you in the nightmare forever. The camera zooms in on Lorenzo dropping an absolute bombshell, swearing he will take every single bullet meant for them. He finally calls them his family. That word hits like an absolute truck. 6 years ago, Clara ghosted him with his unborn kid because she thought he was just a clone of his psycho mafia dad now. He is handing her the dream life she wanted, but it is covered in toxic drama and heavy artillery. It is such a twisted, tragic flex. He cannot give her a normal suburban life, only his mob protection. But we catch a truly beautiful lesson in this messy scene. Real devotion does not come in a perfectly tied gift box. True loyalty is built by deeply broken people, bleeding out just to be better than they were yesterday. Let us break down Clara in this frame, because she totally loses it. The camera stays locked on her as she cries, admitting she has no clue how to date a guy whose whole career is based on organized crime. But Lorenzo does not force it. He steps just close enough to be in her space, respecting her boundaries, asking to earn back the trust he nuked years ago. Clara is low-key terrified that getting back together means living in a golden cage forever. He raises his tattooed hand and literally pauses, giving her every out to run. When she stays put, he gently wipes away a tear. It hits us with a seriously hard truth. Trust is never just magically fixed overnight. It is a crazy fragile bridge that you have to rebuild over a massive drop. one terrifying step at a time. All that scary mob boss energy completely vanishes from Lorenzo. He drops his voice to a whisper and admits something super dark. If he was really on his toxic villain arc, he would just lock her in the mansion and use their son as leverage. That was exactly the kind of shady stuff his dad used to pull. But right now, he promises he will watch her walk away forever if it actually makes her happy. The Don is literally pouring his heart out. Clara totally loses the fight against her feelings, letting her emotional walls crumble as she leans into his hand. It is such a massive plot twist. We are getting a major lesson on healthy relationships here. The absolute biggest flex in love is having the power to trap someone, but choosing to leave the front door wide open. We jump 2 weeks forward, and the beef finally explodes. But the rival boss Ferraro does not send a hit squad. Instead, he drops a massive nuke on the gossip mill. He literally leaks Lorenzo's family secret to the entire criminal underground in 5 seconds flat. Lorenzo goes from this untouchable mafia god to a guy with a massive target on his family. You see all these shady thugs in smoky clubs hyping up the news, plotting to steal the king's crown now that he is distracted. Stick with me, because this hits way too close to home. It forces us to look at a terrifying fact about life. Your biggest weakness is almost never a physical flaw or a lack of cash. The deadliest weapon anyone can use against you is that one massive secret you tried to bury. By day, Lorenzo is still playing the ruthless mafia don, but at 3 in the morning, the guy is completely crashing. Clara catches him in his dark office, looking like his entire empire is going up in flames. She is desperately begging him to fake a story, to hide their son and keep him off the radar. But Lorenzo knows the streets do not forget, and the assassins are already plotting, so he makes the most insane, high-stakes gamble ever. He decides to hard-launch his son to the entire underworld, officially crowning little Marco as the mafia heir and daring anyone to try something. It is a wild lesson about survival, guys. When the drama comes knocking, hiding under the bed just makes it worse. You have to step directly into the heat and own your truth, like an absolute boss. You and I can see the absolute panic in Clara's eyes right here. She is staring at Lorenzo, completely shook that he is willingly putting a massive target on their 5-year-old kid. But Lorenzo is not sugarcoating this mess. He drops the harsh truth that the snipers are already aiming. The only choice left is whether their boy hides in a closet crying or steps out into the spotlight wearing bulletproof gear. He grabs her shoulders, and in that split second, any dream of a quiet, normal life completely burns to the ground. They are locked into this mafia war together now. It is a terrifying reality check about the choices we make. You literally cannot undo the damage. Once your secret is out there, you just have to grab your squad, hold the line, and brace for the impact. Look at how the camera locks onto his weathered face here. Lorenzo drops all his toxic demands, making one final, completely tragic plea. He literally begs Clara to stand with him, while he sets the entire city ablaze, just to keep their kid breathing. He swears that once the ashes settle, she is free to vanish forever. Clara stares at the man who shattered her universe, now standing like a scarred wall between her son and death. Then she asks the ultimate question: what about the little boy, who thinks this is just a fun holiday? Lorenzo goes completely dark. He knows it is finally time to spill everything. It hits hard, guys. Because we all eventually learn that you can only shield someone from the dark for so long before you have to face the crushing weight of reality together. Check out this exact frame. This is the split second the merciless king of the underworld shatters into jagged pieces. His broad shoulders literally cave in. His voice shakes, violently tearing away decades of thick mafia armor. He confesses to Clara that he is completely finished running. He is done wearing his cruelty like a badge, and done echoing the toxic ghost of his father. Clara offers zero resistance. She does not scream or hurl his past sins back in his face. She just lets silent tears fall, whispering a fragile surrender. The brutal irony hangs heavy over the entire scene. It took a 5-year-old kid to break the monster that rival families could never even scratch. It really is a wild reminder that genuine love is truly the only force strong enough to tear down the heavy walls we build around ourselves. The sun casts long shadows as we finally hit the climax we have been dreading. Little Marco sinks into the giant leather sofa, pressed firmly against his trembling mom. His sharp gray eyes dart between these two shattered adults as they desperately try to sanitize their blood-soaked history. They tell him mistakes were made, but that this dangerous man truly loves him. Marco absorbs this with a chilling gravity. You can almost hear the frantic drumming of Clara's heart right through the screen. She is watching her innocent kid swallow a mountain of Mafia trauma. The room goes dead silent. The background score fades out completely as the boy slowly turns to face the ruthless king of the underworld. It goes to show that the quietest moments in life often force us to carry the absolute heaviest burdens of all. This kid interrogates the ruthless crime boss with a precision the feds could only dream of. Marco looks him dead in the eye and asks if he loved his mom, if he still does, and if he loved him before he was even born. Lorenzo's iron voice violently cracks. He confesses that a bleeding hole in his soul finally sealed shut the moment he saw his son. Then comes the real emotional drop. The kid slides off the sofa, marches right up to this towering instrument of death, and fully accepts him. But he lays down one major condition. Lorenzo must never make his mom cry again. It is a breathtaking emotional strike that leaves you totally speechless. It teaches us a beautiful life lesson about true power. The most unbreakable boundaries are always drawn by the innocent, who somehow hold unimaginable sway over the absolute damned. You and I have to appreciate the cinematic gravity of this sequence together. Lorenzo, a phantom who barely blinks staring down a loaded barrel, stands completely paralyzed with tears in his eyes. He chokes out a sacred vow. In response, Marco extends his tiny hand for a solemn shake, sealing a pact like a massive Mafia treaty. Clara watches these mirrored gray eyes lock, forming a delicate truce. Cut to 3 days later, and the lighting turns ice cold. Lorenzo stands before the criminal elite, proudly presenting his heir. It is a flawlessly calculated chess maneuver. He frames his hidden family as a masterstroke of protection, spinning his fatal vulnerability into a wild display of power. It really proves a solid point. We can always consciously transform our deepest, darkest weaknesses into our absolute greatest armor. Lorenzo stares down the underworld, promising to rain hellfire upon anyone who dares to cast a shadow over his boy. The foolish rivals mistake this wild declaration for weakness. The cunning ones shiver, realizing that a mob father defending his bloodline is a force of apocalyptic nature. Yet, Alessandro Ferraro arrogantly dismisses the omen. The camera then hard cuts to a vibrant, sun-drenched Tuesday. Clara is finally exhaling, watching Marco happily chase butterflies in the garden. It is an absolute masterclass in building cinematic tension. We learn a haunting lesson about the rhythm of life in this seemingly peaceful scene. The most terrifying tragedies almost always arrive wrapped in perfect, golden peace. Right before the universe violently rips the ground out from beneath your feet. Without warning, deafening gunfire violently shreds the golden afternoon. The camera lens shakes with pure chaos. Guards scream as heavy rounds pulverize the estate windows, plunging the scene into a mother's worst nightmare. Clara does not hesitate for a second. She snatches Marco and sprints toward the reinforced steel bunker Lorenzo built for this exact apocalypse. She hurls the heavy vault doors shut, sealing them in pitch blackness, and crushes her trembling kid to her chest. She whispers hollow promises of safety she cannot even believe. Just praying the iron holds. It reveals a terrifying truth about human endurance. Time completely stops when you are trapped in the suffocating dark, desperately waiting to see if everything you love will survive the next fragile breath. The heavy steel door shrieks on its hinges, revealing Lorenzo bathed in flickering light. He stands there like the Grim Reaper, his white shirt soaked black with blood. His face is a frozen mask of violence, but the second his cold eyes find Clara and Marco in the shadows, that terrifying aura dissolves. He breathes out a shaky sigh, telling them Ferraro is dead. Clara loses all her strength, collapsing into uncontrollable sobs. Lorenzo falls to his knees beside them. He wraps his massive, trembling arms around his family, shielding them from the horror outside. Right in the center of this trauma, little Marco peers up and innocently asks if his father is okay. It shows us that even in our absolute darkest moments, genuine connection and family are the only anchors that truly matter. You and I both know it is wild how kids process the darkest moments. Lorenz stares out down at his son, swearing no one will ever hurt them again. Marco blinks his wide eyes, nods, and innocently asks if they can go back to looking at bugs in the dirt tomorrow. It is such a staggeringly pure question that Lorenzo actually laughs. It is not his usual cold Mafia smirk, but a real, rusty sound tearing from his chest. He promises his boy they will hunt for bugs every single day. The camera then sweeps us into a fast-paced montage. For months, Lorenzo violently stabilizes his shattered empire, yet, behind the doors of his home, his soul has visibly shifted. It reminds us that deep, lasting healing begins not with grand gestures, but with the simplest joys of life, like playing in the dirt. This is exactly where the massive story earns its heavy emotional weight. Lorenzo ceases to be the untouchable ghost of the underworld. Instead, the terrifying boss sits quietly under the glow of the dining room chandelier every night. He watches the light catch Clara's face, quietly learning exactly how she takes her coffee. They do not magically fall back into bed together, because both carry far too many bleeding scars for a cheap resolution. It is an agonizingly slow, beautiful cinematic burn. We see late-night whispers by the kitchen sink, fingers brushing by pure accident, and desperate glances shared while their son happily babbles. It proves a beautiful point about human nature. True redemption is never a quick fix. It is always built patiently through quiet, daily, consistent effort over time. We have all seen countless stories of mafia trauma, but this frame completely shatters the mold. Clara quietly finds Lorenzo alone in his shadow-soaked study, staring blindly at a faded photograph of his dead father. Lorenzo finally breaks the heavy silence. He confesses how that cruel man drilled it into his bones that caring for anyone was a fatal flaw. But standing in the quiet dark, Lorenzo realizes his father was never strong. He was just a pathetic coward, terrified of real love. Clara steps into the dim light and firmly tells him he is nothing like his old man. Lorenzo admits that she and Marco rescued him from that empty hell. We learn a powerful truth right here. Real strength is never about closing your heart to the cold world, but having the raw courage to let love back in. Watch how the camera frames Clara in this pivotal moment. She steps right into his space, close enough to see the deep lines of regret carved into his face. She refuses to offer him a fake fairy tale pardon. She looks into his eyes and states clearly that his past actions broke her, and total forgiveness might be impossible. But she is willing to try building something entirely new from the ashes. Her fingers slowly trace the faded serpent tattoo curving along his neck, asking if he is truly ready. Lorenzo grips her hand tightly, pledging the rest of his natural life to her. This breathless vow leaves you and me with a hard-earned life lesson. Forgiveness is not about magically erasing the painful past. It is about choosing to build a brand new future from the broken pieces left behind. The absolute poetic justice of them heading back to this specific garden is wild. This altar sits on the exact grass where Marco used to hunt for bugs, the same dirt where they literally dodged raining bullets. Marco struts down the aisle carrying the rings, and right behind him, the busted-up old security chief cracks a rare jagged smile. Clara glides forward in pure white, but she is not playing some flawless maiden today. She walks like a fierce survivor, claiming her right to breathe. Lorenzo waits under the blazing sun, sleeves rolled up, heavy syndicate ink totally exposed. He is completely done wearing that fake gentle mask. It is a beautiful, simple truth. You never have to hide your ugliest scars to finally deserve a real and lasting fresh start. Let us unpack this together, shall we? This is the bitterest pill of the story, make no mistake. Lorenzo is a terrifying monster. He built his syndicate by crushing bones with zero apologies. But the insane twist is that he loves this woman with earth-shattering devotion. As Clara takes his scarred hands, she stares deep into his cold steel eyes. In that silent beat, she sees the broken boy she fell for a lifetime ago. The last of her emotional fortresses crumbles to dust under the sun. Her lips finally part, and she breathes the words she held back for years. I love you. It leaves us with a haunting lesson sometimes. Finding true love requires us to drop our highest walls, just to see the fragile human being hiding behind a lifetime of terrible mistakes. That simple sentence marks the exact second the unbreakable king of the underworld shatters. This ruthless crime boss, a guy who built an empire on never showing weakness, just stands there frozen. Hot tears spill down his cheeks under the harsh sun. He pulls her in tight, whispering she has always been his only light. It feels like a textbook perfect cinematic ending. But you and I know their future is a guaranteed minefield. There will be rival syndicates, gunfire, and bitter fights over raising a kid in the shadow of the Mafia. Yet as the camera pulls away, the core truth remains. A happy ending is never about finding a life completely free of trouble. It is simply about finding the exact right person to stand by your side when the fires inevitably come burning through. The screen fades to black, and 10 heavy years vanish in a heartbeat. The camera finds Marco at 15, and the innocent kid who hunted beetles is totally gone. He sits in the shadows now, asking some seriously dangerous questions. He wants to understand the brutal weight of the family name, and the dark meaning behind the faded ink on his dad's skin. Lorenzo sits across from his boy in the exact same oppressive study, where he once stared down his own father's ghost. The cycle of violence is a relentless machine. Marco has his mother's features, but his eyes hold Lorenzo's cold stare. The boss finally caves and admits his entire empire is built on blood. It is a stark reminder of a very simple truth. We can never outrun our past choices, because the harsh reality of who we really are will always catch up to us. Lorenzo tells the kid straight up that this is the violently messed up underworld he inherited. But get this. Marco does not even blink. He leans forward into the lamplight and calmly states he has known the truth for years. Clara's entire illusion of keeping her son pure shatters like cheap glass. The poison of the syndicate was in the air all along. Lorenzo stares across that oak desk and realizes he is looking into a perfect mirror. Same blood, same chilling detachment. Then Marco tilts his head and drops the one question that pierces the boss straight through the heart. He asks if his father regrets any of it. The suffocating silence that follows reveals a brutal reality. The absolute hardest mirror to look into is the one that reflects our own deepest flaws staring right back at us through the eyes of our children. Memories bleed through Lorenzo's mind, his son's tiny hand clutching his own, Clara weeping in her dress. The beautiful life he nearly drowned in mob blood. Lorenzo looks at his teenage boy and delivers the most twisted justification a father could ever speak. He whispers that he only regrets the moments he failed them, but he will never regret the violent path that brought them together. It is an act of staggering selfishness, completely disguised as pure romance. Marco, his face terrifyingly calm, simply nods in response. Then he casually asks what happens to the syndicate when his father is gone. He is literally asking for the keys to hell. This brutal moment proves a heavy truth. Selfishness disguised as love will always demand a devastating price from the exact people we claim to hold most dear. Stick with me here, because we need to look at the absolute horror of what is happening. Lorenzo tells his boy the choice is entirely his. He swears to protect him if he walks away, but watch closely how the trap springs shut. Lorenzo leans in and offers the ultimate hook. He promises to teach Marco to rule the syndicate with wisdom, to protect the family name without losing his soul. It is a breathtaking, fatal lie. You cannot rule a kingdom of corpses and expect to keep your humanity intact. Lorenzo gently places his scarred hand over his son's smooth fingers. Marco stares down at the terrifying legacy waiting to consume him. This carries a massive life lesson. You can never truly protect someone from a toxic environment while you are actively inviting them to sit on its darkest throne. The camera pushes in close as Marco stares at his father's shattered knuckles. His voice is dangerously steady when he says he wants to learn the family business. You and I know the devastating truth. The second that boy steps into the underworld, his fate is sealed forever, yet Lorenzo's chest swells with a foolish, tragic pride. He whispers that they begin tomorrow, and the heavy wheel of generational trauma clicks right back into place. The scene then shifts to the moonlit garden. Clara sits alone on the exact stone bench where they married, staring up at the cold stars. She has become the enabler who lost everything. Her silent grief is absolute proof of one thing. Turning a blind eye to the ugly truth only ensures that history will violently repeat itself. Fast forward to the dark velvet shadows of the patio. Lorenzo sits heavily, the crushing weight of his sins pulling at him as he drops the news. He tells her the boy wants to learn. Clara barely blinks, replying that she already knows. She does not scream or pack her bags. She simply surrenders to the gravity of their life. Lorenzo confesses his bitter doubt, wishing a clean path existed for his son. But Clara defends the shadows, insisting Marco is making his own choice. She rests her tired head on his chest and whispers that right now is all they have. It is a stunning, absolute defeat. The profound tragedy here is how easily we adapt to the dark. They just watch the stars together, while inside that cold fortress. Their teenage boy closes his eyes and drifts into dreams soaked in blood. The scene tries to wrap this nightmare in a warm cinematic glow. We are supposed to believe Marco will face the future protected by a father who learned love is not a weakness, and a mother who remembered how to trust. Lorenzo leans in, whispering his love. Clara smiles through her exhaustion, echoing it back. They sit peacefully among the blooms, pretending their violent ghosts are buried. But let us look at the devastating reality together one last time. They did not conquer the darkness of the syndicate. They simply opened the door and set a permanent place for it at their dinner table. They survived the storm, but victory always demands a terrible toll. They won the bloody battle to save their marriage, but they ultimately sacrificed their own son's soul to make it happen.
Marco is one of the most meaningful characters in the story because he represents innocence inside a dangerous adult world. He does not understand mafia politics, betrayal, or revenge. He only understands what children understand best: presence, absence, love, and honesty. For years, Marco asks why he does not have a father. Clara tries to answer carefully because she wants to protect him from pain. But when Lorenzo appears, Marco quickly understands what adults have tried to hide. He notices the shared eyes. He notices the tension. He asks direct questions because children often see emotional truth before adults are ready to say it. This teaches a valuable educational lesson. Children deserve truth, but truth must be given with care. Hiding everything from a child may seem protective, but silence can also create confusion. At the same time, telling a child too much too soon can burden them with adult pain they are not ready to carry. Clara and Lorenzo eventually choose a balanced path. They tell Marco that Lorenzo is his father. They explain that mistakes were made and that Lorenzo did not know about him. They do not give him every violent detail, but they give him enough truth to understand his life. Marco's response is deeply moving. He does not ask for wealth, inheritance, or power. He asks whether Lorenzo loved his mother. He asks whether Lorenzo loved him before knowing him. Most importantly, he asks Lorenzo not to make Clara cry anymore. This shows the moral clarity of a child. For viewers, the lesson is important. Children are not blind to family pain. They may not understand every detail, but they feel the emotional atmosphere around them. Adults should protect children from unnecessary darkness, but they should not build their childhood on lies. The best truth is honest, gentle, and age-appropriate.